his beloved wife Ella died, Wilma Castro, the head of a food company, didn't think he could ever love again or be happy. But people say grief lasts about 3 years, and maybe they were right. Anna, Wilma's mother, often told her son, "Dear, your son needs a mother. You should keep living. I hope you find a good woman who will be a good wife for you and a good mother for our little Tio." One day, the young widower met Ingrid. After a week, he knew she was the one he wanted to spend his life with. Ingrid quickly connected with his 6-year-old son Tio, which made Wilma even more sure about their relationship. A couple of months later, Wilma proposed to Ingrid, and they had a beautiful wedding. Anna was thrilled and said, "Now I'm not afraid to die. You and Tio are in good hands." Wilma replied, "Mom, stop saying that. Ingrid and I haven't given you a granddaughter yet, and you'll definitely dance at Tio's wedding." After their honeymoon in the Seychelles, the newlyweds started their family life, which Wilma described as beautiful. Unfortunately, after a while, Wilma faced a serious problem. Tio started getting sick very often, and his father, Wilma, couldn't figure out why. Ingrid loved the boy a lot and tried to create a healthy environment for him, but it didn't help. One illness came after another: runny noses, sore throats, and even bronchitis. "Why don't we send him to a health camp?" Ingrid suggested. "But Tio has never been away from home for so long," Wilma replied thoughtfully. "Well, there's a first time for everything," Ingrid said. "Yes, but not at 6 years old," Wilma objected. "It seems too early for him to be far away from his family." "I understand your concern, but I think it will be good for Tio. He'll become more independent and get some fresh air and a change of environment. Maybe life in the city isn't good for him." "No, I hadn't thought about that," Wilma said, shaking his head. "I'm totally confused. I don't understand why he keeps getting sick. Everything was fine before. I try my best to keep him safe from viruses, but nothing works," Ingrid said, sobbing and wiping her tears. "I watch his diet and air out his room regularly. I don't want to keep him far away from us because I love him," Wilma said, "but I can't stand to see him suffer anymore. My heart aches for the poor boy. Maybe airing his room less often would help. I think it's too chilly in there." "That's not a problem," Ingrid replied. "It's worse for him when it's very hot. Fresh air helps reduce germs, but I'm not a doctor. In the camp, Tio will be under the care of specialists." "Well, maybe you're right," Wilma said thoughtfully. "Maybe a health camp isn't such a bad idea. I'll think about it. Thank you, my dear, for all you do for my son." Wilma began looking for good children's camps and soon found a suitable one for Tio. He contacted the camp administration. "We have an individualized approach for each child," said a woman with a pleasant voice. "The minimum stay is 2 months." 2 months, Wilma repeated in a quiet voice. He wasn't ready to be apart from his son for so long. "Yes, 2 months," the administrator confirmed. "But don't worry, you can visit your child any time." "Well, that's not so bad," Wilma replied. "How do I sign up?" The administrator explained everything, and that was it. Now Wilma had to prepare Tio for the trip. After all, he was going to be away from home for 2 months. But to Wilma's surprise, Tio's eyes lit up. "Will I get to play with other kids there?" Tio asked excitedly. Wilma sighed, realizing Tio was excited. He had taken Tio out of school when he started getting sick often, so Tio missed being around other children. Ingrid was right. A kids' health camp was a great idea. However, a week before the trip, Tio complained of a severe headache. When Wilma touched his forehead, it was burning hot. The thermometer showed a temperature of almost 40 degrees Celsius. "Oh God, this is the last thing we need," Wilma muttered, sinking into a chair in despair. "What's wrong?" Ingrid asked, hearing her husband's worried words. "Theo is sick again, and it seems serious," Wilma said. Ingrid looked closely at Theo. His face was red, and sweat was forming on his forehead. "It looks like we'll have to postpone the trip," Wilma said. "We're going to the doctor." "Are you sure? We still have a week before we leave. Maybe he'll get better," Ingrid suggested. But the next day, Theo was still very sick. The doctor said the trip was no longer an option and recommended hiring a nurse. "Thank you," Wilma said to the doctor. "Why do we need a nurse?" Ingrid exclaimed. "Why bring a stranger into the house?" "Do you know anything about medicine?" Wilma interrupted firmly. He was very protective when it came to his son. "Well, no, but—" "Then the conversation is over," he said. "Tonight I'll go online and find a nurse." Ingrid realized that Wilma's decision was final and didn't argue. She nodded in agreement. "Okay," Wilma concluded. "I need to go to the office now. Take care of Theo. Call me if there's an emergency." After finishing urgent tasks at work, Wilma rushed home. He trusted Ingrid but felt calmer with Theo nearby. On his way home, while crossing a bridge, he saw a very young, poorly dressed girl who looked lost and then put her leg over the railing, about to jump. Wilma quickly stopped his car and rushed out. "What are you doing?" he shouted, pulling the girl away from the railing. "Are you tired of living?" "Yes, tired," the girl sobbed. "This isn't life, it's just suffering." "Come on, let's go to the car," Wilma said. After a moment of hesitation, the girl followed. "What's your name?" Wilma asked gently. "Corey," the girl replied timidly. "Corey, why does such a young, beautiful girl think life is suffering?" Wilma asked. "I'm pregnant," Corey whispered, starting to cry. "Wow, congratulations," Wilma said, shaking his head. "So you've decided not only to ruin yourself but also your innocent child?" "My fiancé left me," the girl kept sobbing. "I trusted him, and he did such a cruel thing to me." "I see," Wilma nodded, "but that's still no reason to take your life and your child's life." "It's easy for you to say," she sighed, "but I have no one to turn to and nowhere to live." "What about your parents?" Wilma asked. Corey explained that her father left the family when she was 2 years old. Her mother raised her alone. When Corey was 14, her mother met Bob. Bob moved into their house in the village and took care of repairs and chores. He seemed like a hard worker, and both Corey and her mother appreciated his help. Everything was good for about 3 months, but then Bob started having long bouts of drunkenness. "Mom, why don't you kick him out?" Corey asked. "Why do you need him?" "You wouldn't understand," her mother had said. "Even though he's bad, he's mine." Then her mother got very sick, with no hope of recovery. She passed away in a few months, like a candle burning out. Bob stayed with Corey, saying, "I'm registered here, so I'm not leaving." Corey didn't like living with Bob, who was basically a stranger, but she had no choice because Bob had the right to stay there. Eventually, she met Steve. They rented an apartment and started living together. But when Corey told Steve she was pregnant, he wasn't happy. She moved out of their apartment, and when she tried to go back to her mother's house, she found it had burned down. Bob said it was because of old wiring, but Corey thought it was because he smoked in bed. "I was desperate," Corey said. "I had nowhere to go and no one to ask for help." "There's always a way out," Wilma said gently. "No, I'm not going to have an abortion, Corey said, shaking her head. My mother told me never to do that because of my Rh-negative blood type. If I did, I might never be able to have a baby again. I see, Wilma sighed, puzzled. Unlike many businessmen, Wilma Castro had not lost his compassion for people, and he really wanted to help Corey. But how could he help her? What can you do? Wilma asked. What do you mean? Corey frowned. You think because you have money, you can. She didn't finish her thought and looked at Wilma indignantly. Wilma looked confused, and then he laughed. Wait, Corey, he said. Did you think I wanted to offer you something inappropriate? Corey blushed. I'm sorry, she muttered. Let me be clear, Wilma said. Would you like to work for me as a maid? A maid? Corey asked. Do you need one? Well, you could say that. Wilma nodded. I have a maid, but she isn't working out very well. What's wrong with her? Corey asked. What if I'm not right for the job for the same reason? I hope that's not the case. Wilma smiled. My current maid is, let's say, overstepping her boundaries. But I'd like to know what skills you have. Corey was silent for about half a minute and then said, I did 4 years of medical school, but I quit when I found out I was pregnant and my boyfriend left me. Oh, Wilma exclaimed. Why didn't you take a leave of absence? Everything happened at once. I just couldn't handle it, Corey said. I understand, Wilma replied. Then he had an idea. What if I hire you as a nurse for my son, Theo? 4 years of medical school is impressive. Corey looked scared. Oh no, I don't think I can, she said timidly. I'm afraid I can't handle it, Corey said. Didn't they teach you anything in medical school? Wilma asked, widening his eyes. I can't believe that. Corey kept saying no, but Wilma's natural ability to persuade did the job. When Corey finally agreed, she felt both joy and shame. Just a moment ago, she had wanted to give up on life, and now she had a job and a place to stay. You never know where you'll find help or lose it. Ingrid, however, was furious. She did not like the idea of having a stranger in the house. Why do you need this homeless woman? Ingrid exclaimed. Why did you bring her here? She'll only make things worse. What makes you say that? Wilma asked calmly. Corey has some medical training. If she had finished medical school, she'd be a great therapist. The key word is unfinished. Ingrid said angrily, do you really think I'd hire Corey if she didn't have any knowledge at all? We talked during the ride and then met with Theo's doctor. He's convinced she's the right person for the job. I don't know, Ingrid said irritably. She's just an undergrad, and she's pregnant. Honestly, I was shocked by your decision, darling. I know how careful you are about Theo, but trust me, everything will be fine, Wilma assured Ingrid. I don't think so, Ingrid thought, but she said nothing. Corey seemed to know her job well, even though she wasn't a qualified doctor. She quickly made the same diagnosis as the visiting doctor and noticed that Theo's room was too damp. His frequent illnesses are probably because of this, Corey suggested. Changing his room and belongings might help, so he wouldn't need to go to the camp. What a know-it-all, Ingrid thought angrily. She didn't want to live with someone like Corey. However, Wilma trusted his instincts and believed Corey's presence would be beneficial, and he was right. Theo liked Corey, seeing her as a good, kind relative if not a mother. To be sure of Corey's trustworthiness and to monitor Theo's well-being, Wilma installed a camera. He reviewed the footage while at work and was pleased. Corey was doing her job perfectly, and Theo was happy with her. The only problem was Ingrid. Wilma noticed that Ingrid wasn't happy about the young nurse. She tried to convince him that Corey lacked professionalism, but Wilma suspected there was another reason. Maybe Ingrid is just jealous, Wilma thought. Initially, Wilma hadn't paid much attention to Corey's appearance, but after she tidied herself up and wore new clothes bought with his advance payment, he noticed she was quite attractive. Corey had long, light blonde hair, bright blue eyes, soft pink lips, and a natural blush. Ingrid was also beautiful, but her looks came from stylists, makeup artists, and hairdressers. People like Ingrid are often seen as stunning but not naturally beautiful. Maybe that's the issue, Wilma thought. I should bring Ingrid a nice gift for my business trip, Wilma decided. She loves that, and then we can go somewhere to relax. At dinner, Wilma announced, I have to go on a business trip tomorrow. It'll be for a couple of weeks. Can you manage without me? Sure, honey, Ingrid nodded. You could be sure there won't be any unpleasant surprises from my side. She gave Corey an unfriendly look. Wilma sighed quietly. Here we go again, he thought. As he continued to observe Tao and Corey, he became more convinced that Corey was a blessing. She spent almost the entire day with Teo, genuinely caring about his well-being. She regularly measured Teo's temperature and gave him his medicine as prescribed. In short, Corey did her job to the best of her ability. As for qualifications, she would eventually get her degree. For now, Wilma could only hope Ingrid would warm up to Corey over time. What unpleasant surprises are you talking about? Wilma smiled. The main thing is that you two get along, Teo chimed in. Corey and I already get along well. That's great, his father concluded. Ingrid continued eating dinner with a sour expression. It wasn't jealousy of Corey taking care of her stepson. Rather, she feared Corey's supposed medical background could threaten her position. Ingrid saw one way to get rid of Corey, by framing her. The question was how. Never mind, Ingrid thought optimistically. There will be a way eventually. Oh, by the way, Ingrid said to Corey as soon as Wilma left for his trip, from now on, you'll eat in the kitchen. Corey shrugged, but Tao objected. No, Corey will eat with us. While your daddy is away, it'll be as I say, Ingrid retorted. No, Tao frowned. You mean, Ingrid? There's no need to argue, Corey said calmly, sitting down at the table. I'll eat in the kitchen, and then as usual, I'll come to you. It's really no big deal. All right, the boy nodded after a moment's thought. After breakfast, Corey took Teo out for a walk. Meanwhile, Ingrid tried to solve the issue with Corey without her presence. Think, Ingrid, think, she mentally urged herself. There must be a way to get rid of this intruder. She went up to her stepson's room intending to air it out once more. Suddenly, her gaze fell on the camera. Of course, how could I not have thought of that? Ingrid's plan was simple. She deliberately placed her purse in Teo's room where the camera could see it. She was certain Corey would take the purse and return it to her. Then she could convince her husband that Corey was just a thief. The plan worked. Corey noticed the purse and, thinking it belonged to Ingrid, decided to return it. Is this yours, Ingrid? She asked, holding out the purse. I'm Mrs. Castro, Ingrid said arrogantly. Mrs. Castro, is this your purse? Corey repeated with faint irony. Yes, it's mine, Ingrid nodded, opening it. It's empty. Where's my money? Well, I didn't take any money, Corey replied firmly, sensing what Ingrid was implying. I found this purse in Teo's room and brought it to you immediately. Whether it was empty or had something in it, I didn't check. But I did. There were $1,000 in credit cards in there, Ingrid accused. Well, you've cleared it out, Corey remarked with a chuckle. She wouldn't allow herself to be accused falsely. I'm not foolish enough to take your money and return an empty purse. How would I know what you're thinking? She grumbled. I bet you emptied it somewhere away from the camera and then pretended innocence. Get out of here. Thieves don't belong in a decent home, Ingrid threatened. You can consider the money you stole as your severance pay. But I didn't take any money, Corey insisted, her voice trembling. I don't want to hear your lies, Ingrid said coldly. If you don't leave in 15 minutes, you'll be explaining yourself at the police station. Trust me, it'll be harder for you. Who do you think they'll believe? Me, the wife of a respectable businessman, or you, some half-doctor beggar? Corey realized arguing was pointless. She went to her room to pack her things while Ingrid watched triumphantly. Everything had gone according to her plan. Corey left the house, grateful that Tao hadn't seen her departure. Her future looked bleak with only enough money for a couple of nights in the cheapest hostel. When Wilma heard Ingrid's accusation about Corey's theft, he was devastated. He couldn't believe it. He had helped Corey out of compassion, and she had betrayed him. It shattered his faith in people. After watching the tape, he was convinced Corey had taken Ingrid's wallet from the table. But did Corey take money from it? That was the question on Wilmer's mind. On the other hand, he had no reason to distrust his wife. Yes, Ingrid disliked the nurse from the start, but making baseless accusations would be too much, even for her disgruntled state. Besides, Ingrid cared for Teo and couldn't ignore the positive impact Corey had on him. The camera couldn't confirm the theft, but it was true that Corey had the purse in her hands. You know, when someone is strapped for cash, they might do more than just take a wallet, Ingrid remarked. How do you know what kind of trouble she's really in? Maybe she owes money to someone. What do you really know about her besides what she's told you? Nothing. Wilmer had to admit his wife had a point. No matter how much you feed the wolf, he still looks into the forest, he sadly admitted. It's sadly true to admit. Most likely, Corey did steal the money. After the conversation with her husband, Ingrid drank white wine with exotic fruits and gloated. You've lived in a decent house and slept on clean sheets. It's time to return to your usual, good-for-nothing life, she thought viciously. Where's Corey? Tao asked when his stepmother entered his room in the evening. Corey doesn't work for us anymore, Ingrid shrugged and opened the window. Why? The child asked sadly. Because your beloved Corey stole my money, the stepmother eagerly replied. You're lying. Corey's good, you're bad, Tao defended, hurt by the accusation. If you don't want to believe it, I don't care, Ingrid grinned. Close the window, please. But I'm cold, Tao pleaded. All right, the stepmother replied after a pause, closing the window. The next day, Teo felt sick again. I feel bad, Tito complained. Well, what's the matter with you again? Ingrid rolled her eyes. The boy was flushed, and his eyes had an unhealthy glow. Give me the syrup, Tao asked quietly. What syrup? You don't even know what syrup, exclaimed Ingrid, frustrated. Why did you kick Corey out? I've already explained to you that she's a thief, Ingrid said firmly. Not another word about her, do you understand? Teo, sensing he wouldn't get what he wanted, decided it was better to wait for Daddy. Reluctantly, Ingrid gave him the syrup and left the room. She wanted to open the window, but Teo said he was very cold, so she left it closed. As Teo lay in bed, he felt miserable. It wasn't just the illness. He missed Corey deeply. He knew Daddy loved him very much, but he was busy with work. Ingrid, on the other hand, seemed to care only about herself and Wilmer's money. Corey, despite her abrupt departure, had shown genuine care for him. Meanwhile, Corey was struggling. After 2 nights in a hostel, she searched desperately for any accommodation. She hoped someone kind might offer her a loan or let her stay in exchange for help with household chores. However, as time passed, her hopes dimmed. No one seemed willing to lend her a hand. Still determined, Corey decided to visit the neighborhood where she and Steve had once rented an apartment. It was known for its cheap rentals due to its high crime rate. Miraculously, she found someone willing to rent her a tiny, run-down apartment. The landlord was a heavy drinker, and the apartment was dirty and smelled of smoke, but it was better than living on the streets. "I expect the money in a month," said the drunk landlord, sealing the deal with Corey, who nodded heartily. She desperately hoped to find work soon. The main challenge was keeping her pregnancy hidden during her job search. The landlord would often visit, asking about the money, though not a month had passed. "It hasn't been a month yet," Corey would invariably reply, suspecting the man needed money for alcohol, and sooner was better. Corey eventually landed a job at a food delivery service that paid weekly, much to her relief. The pay was good, and she managed to fill her fridge and set aside money for rent after a week of work. But her fortunes quickly turned when she fell ill at work. Loaded with products to deliver, she fainted, prompting a worried administrator to call an ambulance. "In your condition, it's not normal to carry such heavy weights," the doctor informed her at the hospital. "You are at risk of miscarriage. You'll need to stay here for a couple of days." Corey sighed heavily. She had only worked for 2 days that week and worried about being paid. No work again, no money, she thought sadly. How will I pay the rent? Despite her predicament, Corey found solace in the hospital's comfort compared to her shabby apartment. She called the landlord, explaining her situation and asking for an extra week to pay. However, the landlord was not sympathetic this time. "I don't care. Do you have any money at all?" he interrupted her complaints. "Yes, in the kitchen cupboard, under the blue teapot," Corey replied, hoping this would convince him of her ability to pay and earn some leniency. "That's good," the landlord said, visibly pleased. "I'll take all the money. That's 1 month's rent, plus moral compensation for the wait. And you shouldn't come back here again. I don't need irresponsible tenants." Corey realized the harsh reality of her situation as she left the hospital with nowhere to go and dwindling options ahead. "Where can I get the key at the city hospital?" Corey answered gloomily, "I'll leave it with the lady on duty." "Why aren't you eating, Ingrid?" asked Wilma, watching her steps and pick at a plate of pasta with a frown. "I don't want to," Theo mumbled defiantly, pushing the plate away. The boy missed Corey a lot but knew better than to talk about her to his stepmother, who might start accusing her of stealing again. "How are you, Wilma?" cheerfully asked the householder upon returning from a business trip. "Fine," purred Ingrid, kissing her husband. "Yeah," he smiled, "that's great. Where's Theo?" "He's in his room," she replied. Seeing his son, Will froze with his mouth open. He didn't even recognize Theo at first. The boy looked pale, shrunken, and unhappy. "Are you sick again?" the worried father asked. "Dad, can Corey come back?" replied the boy, a tear rolling down his pale cheek. Wilma was confused. "Son, I would love for her to come back, but it's impossible," he replied in despair. Wilmer looked at his wife, silently asking if Theo knew about the theft. Ingrid barely nodded. "Daddy, I know that Ingrid thinks Corey stole the money," said the shrewd child, "but that's not true. She's good, and Ingrid is bad. I was cold, and she opened the window." "What are you talking about, good or bad?" Ingrid couldn't take it anymore. If only it were that simple. "Ingrid, don't yell at the child," Wilma said quietly but firmly. I'm sorry, she stammered, but you should understand. I understand, said the husband. When I left, Theo got sick again. Isn't that reason enough to listen to his request? Ingrid couldn't believe her ears. Are you going to hire her again? Maybe, Wilmer replied. I'd like to hear the other side of this story first. Without delay, Wilmer began his search for Corey. It didn't seem easy because she had no permanent address. All he had was the address of the apartment she shared with her child's father, but they had broken up. It was unlikely she would return after such betrayal, though she might have acquaintances there. It's worth a try, reasoned Wilma. There are no other clues yet. The neighborhood looked shabby to the successful businessman. It felt like a different world on its streets. Wilmer showed Corey's picture to the locals, but people just shrugged. He was about to leave empty-handed when luck smiled on him. Yes, I saw this girl yesterday, nodded a woman in her 40s, wearing a flowered dress and a faded sweater. She rented an apartment in that house over there, on the first floor. Thank you very much. Wilmer thanked the woman and headed to the indicated building. At the entrance, he saw 3 drunken men and asked, Guys, have any of you rented an apartment to a woman named Corey? Well, let's say it's me, one of them replied with a smile, showing his few remaining teeth. She was my tenant. Is it really you? Wilmer asked. Yes, she rented from me. The man replied, eyeing Wilmer with interest, clearly hoping for some money. Whatever you ask, as long as the information is useful, Wilmer guessed. He paid $50 and found out the information was indeed important. Corey had rented an apartment from the drunk man, but he had asked her to leave because she hadn't paid. Do you know where she could be now? Asked Wilmer, not expecting an answer. The day before yesterday, she was in the city hospital. The man replied. She called and tried to get me to let her stay another week. I said no, I'm not running a charity. I see, Wilmer nodded, taking money out of his wallet and walking away. What kind of jerk kicks a pregnant woman out? Wilmer thought angrily. But then again, what else could I expect from someone like him? However, Wilmer was more focused on something else. If Corey, as Ingrid claimed, had stolen money, why couldn't she pay for her place? The answer was clear. Corey hadn't stolen anything, and Ingrid hadn't paid her. Wilmer felt terribly embarrassed. Corey had worked for him for nearly a month, doing her job perfectly, and Theo had recovered and grown attached to her. I just have to find her, Wilmer thought, heading to the city hospital. Praying that Corey was there, he found her. I was threatened with miscarriage, Corey said sadly, her smile tinged with sorrow. Wilmer's heart sank. That's not what I wanted for someone who worked for me, he thought anxiously. You did a good job while you were here, he said aloud, raising his eyebrows in surprise. Yeah, Corey nodded. After Ingrid kicked me out, I found a job at a delivery service. That's actually why I wanted to talk to you, Wilmer began. It's a very delicate issue, Wilmer said, unsure of what to say next. Corey spoke up to help. Mr. Castro, I didn't take your wife's purse. Well, I did, but I didn't look inside. I just wanted to give it back to her. Corey sounded desperate, and Wilmer believed her sincerity. I believe you, he said quietly. Let's go back. I agree, but your wife won't let me work, Corey said uncertainly. I'll handle my wife, Wilmer assured her. Good, Corey nodded. Now rest and take care of yourself. We're looking forward to having you back. Wilmer smiled. The doctors worked hard, and Corey's pregnancy was saved. Wilma and Theo came to her discharge together. I'm very glad you're coming back, little Theo said seriously, looking at her. Seeing Corey, Ingrid pressed her lips together unhappily but said nothing. She didn't know what to do. Oh, these Beckers, Ingrid thought grudgingly. They are rarely tenacious creatures. You close the door, they come in through the window. There's no point in trying to set Corey up again. Wilmer wouldn't believe it anyway. Tao quickly recovered, his cheeks rounded and rosy. He loved going for walks with his nanny. They visited the zoo, amusement parks, and other fun spots for young visitors. Once, Tao and Corey found a puppy at the park, took him in, and named him Finn. Wilmer was happy, but something still bothered him. "Corey, you're like a magician," he said one day. "Tao has recovered, grown stronger, and is happier now than before. What's your secret?" "Miracles, that's what," Corey replied shyly. Tao was moved to a new room, where optimal air temperature and carefully chosen medications worked wonders. "That's all the miracles," Corey explained. At the mention of temperature, Wilmer suddenly remembered his son's complaints about Ingrid. "I was cold, and she opened the window." It struck Wilmer that this might have caused Tao's frequent illnesses. Wilmer had often wondered why his son's room was damp. Initially, he thought it was a construction error, but now a troubling thought emerged. What if Ingrid intentionally kept Tao's room cool? She had even suggested sending him to a health camp. But why? Wilmer realized he couldn't easily accuse his wife of such a thing. Instead, he decided to order an independent examination. In his heart, he hoped he was wrong. He couldn't imagine marrying someone capable of intentionally harming his son's health. The relationship between Wilmer and Ingrid became strained. One day, Ingrid casually brought up whether it was appropriate for servants to eat at the same table as the hosts. "Maybe," Wilma nodded calmly, "but Corey has become a member of our family. She cured my son, for which I'll be grateful for the rest of my life." Ingrid frowned and tears welled up in her eyes. "Okay, I get it. Since you don't need me here anymore, it's time to end this charade, Wilma. I'm filing for divorce. I can't be married to a man who doesn't love me at all." With those words, she got up and ran upstairs to her bedroom. Of course, Ingrid had no intention of actually divorcing Wilmer. It was just a manipulation. She hoped Wilmer would chase after her, beg for forgiveness, and agree to fire Corey. However, Ingrid proved to be a poor manipulator. Wilmer willingly signed the divorce papers and even stated he intended to give Ingrid everything she was entitled to, which was nothing. Being foresighted, Wilmer had a prenuptial agreement, so Ingrid ended up with nothing. "Be grateful I didn't accuse you of taking all the money from the safe," Wilmer said to her after the divorce was finalized. Ingrid gave her ex-husband a hateful look, but it didn't faze him. "Well, my dear, note that it wasn't me who filed for divorce." Wilma grinned, handing her the results of an independent examination. "Goodbye. I wish you happiness in your search for another fool." "To hell with you." Ingrid angrily walked away, her heels clacking loudly. "How could I fail so stupidly?" Ingrid thought bitterly. "Well, I'll make life fun for you. They say laughter is best when you laugh last." That same evening, armed with gasoline and a lighter, Ingrid went to Corey and Teo's house. Corey and Teo were playing board games while Finn, their dog, roamed happily. Wilma was expected back soon. "It smells burnt," Teo remarked. Corey sniffed and also noticed the burning smell. Then she saw flames through the window. "I'm scared, Corey," Teo cried. "Calm down, darling. Stay calm," Corey reassured him, picking him up and running towards the exit. They couldn't waste any time. The fire was spreading fast. Corey placed Teo safely on the grass and took a moment to catch her breath. A neighbor ran up, saying, "I've already called the fire department." "Theo, there's Finn," Corey realized. Without hesitation, she rushed back into the blazing house. Minutes later, a deafening explosion shook the area as the house collapsed like a house of cards. Driving home, Wilmer couldn't believe his eyes. His beloved house was engulfed in flames. "Where's my son?" Wilmer shouted as he jumped out of the car. "He's safe at the neighbor's," a firefighter assured him. Wilma rushed towards the neighbor's house, hoping Corey and Finn were safe too. "Corey," Theo stammered, overwhelmed with shock. "And Finn, they've taken her to the hospital," Wilma learned. "She's seriously injured." At the hospital, Wilma found out Corey was stable. Her hands and feet were burned, but her life and pregnancy weren't in danger. Thankfully, Corey had escaped just before the house collapsed through an emergency exit. Wilmer sat by Corey's bedside as she slept under sedation, holding her hand with a worried expression. He realized how much he cared for her. "I never got the chance to tell you that I love you," Wilmer whispered, gently squeezing Corey's hand. The house was destroyed by fire but was insured. Security cameras captured Ingrid setting the fire, but she couldn't be prosecuted because she was declared insane and placed in a psychiatric hospital. Corey recovered day by day. One day, Wilmer visited her at the hospital with Theo. "Why did you risk your life like that?" Wilmer asked. "It's Theo's favorite puppy. We found him in the park and took care of him," Corey explained with a smile. "As you know, we're responsible for those we've tamed." "Then you're responsible for me, Corey," Wilmer said softly. "After this ordeal, I've realized how much you mean to me. I won't let you go anywhere else if you'll have me." Corey underwent rehabilitation and they got married. On New Year's Eve, she felt the joy of motherhood as their baby girl was born. This new year became the happiest time in Wilmer's life as their family grew happier and stronger, reminding him why life was worth living for.
"All right, everyone's presentations are done," Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak. "There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only." "Absolutely right." His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. "Probably Sam." Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. "Do you know how much revenue we get from that company?" "We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs. Gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized." Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. "All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason." "What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do." "I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you." "Please." Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, "Yes. That's Nick for you." Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next." Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. "If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you." I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.